Well, good morning, everybody. Glad to be with you this morning. So I don't know if any of you took road trips this summer. We did. And there are things about road trips that kind of drive me crazy. Construction, lots of traffic. And then the third one, which is the absolute worst one, is getting lost, right? I mean, getting lost is just the most awful thing. And so years ago, back in the days before GPS and back in the days before cell phones, that had maps on them and directions and stuff like that, I was living in South Carolina with my parents. I had just graduated college. I was trying to find my long-term career and job, and I was volunteering with a student ministry at the church where I was going. And we had an event where I needed to take a student home afterward. And so home was about 30 minutes from where I lived, and it was in an area that I wasn't particularly familiar with. And so he took me on a shortcut to get to his house that saved about 5 to 10 minutes. And so I just, thought to myself, well, shoot, I can do that. And I decided to take that shortcut home. Now, some of you know exactly where this story is going, because in those moments, I began living out my own Choose Your Own Adventure story. Anybody familiar with the Choose Your Own Adventure stories? Growing up, I used to read those back in the 80s. There were these books that I just couldn't devour enough of, because you're reading the book, and as you're reading the book, the character has this big decision to make of where to go and what to do, and you get to help him decide. And so, you're at the top of a mountain and there's this wobbly rope bridge. You could walk across the wobbly rope bridge, and if you want to do that, turn to page X. Or you could try and scale down the mountain, and if you want to do that, turn to page Y. And you have to make the choice. Goodness, do I go across this rope bridge or do I scale down the mountain? And you don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, you can walk across the rope bridge and it snaps, or you could scale down the mountain and get pecked to death by eagles. I mean, you just don't really know what's going to happen. But in the end, you decide what's going to happen, and you get to choose your own adventure. And whatever choices you make determine the place where you end up in the story. And so that's what I was doing. I was choosing my own adventure as I decided to figure out and take this shortcut home. And so I took a road that led to another road that led to another road. And I've got a great inner sense of direction in most situations, but down south, the roads, they're not in a grid system like here in Indiana. They just paved over old carriage trails. And so I take a road that weaves around, and that makes sense. I'll go this way. And eventually I took a road that led to another road that led to another road that led to lost. And the thing about getting lost is you never know when you're getting there. You just know when you are there. And I didn't know where Lost was. I mean, I could have been in another state for all I knew. I think I was driving for maybe 2 hours, in this 30-minute trip home. And so I did the very thing that you're never, guys hate doing, and that's you stop and ask for directions, and you figure out where it was. And I asked myself, how did I get here? Well, I took the road that took the road that took the road that ended up there. And that's kind of how life is, right? I mean, roads have a way of leading us exactly where it is that they go. I mean, think about the interstate out here, I-74. If you go out to I-74 and you head east, you'll get to Cincinnati. If you head west, you'll get where? Anybody? Indianapolis, right? And so let's just say, football season's coming up, and you're just a huge Colts fan. You've never been to a Colts game, and you want to go to Lucas Oil Stadium, and so you buy tickets online. You pack up all your tailgating gear because that's what you're going to do, and you prayed about it even. I mean, this was a gift. I mean, you're so excited about it. You tell your friends, hey, watch television. You're going to see me in the stands. We got great seats, and you're going to see me there. And then you get on the highway, and you head east. Right? I mean, it doesn't matter how much you prayed about it. It doesn't matter what you want to do. It doesn't matter, how much you've told other people this is what you're going to do. Maybe this was your moment for you to be at this football game. But as long as you head on east on I-74 from Batesville, you will never, ever, ever end up in Indianapolis. Now, we get that in life, right? I mean, nobody's like, oh my goodness, where did you come up with that? I mean, that's just mind-blowing, right? I mean, we understand that with school, right? Some of you are starting school this week. You're pretty excited about that, I can tell. 180 days of learning opportunities is what you've got right in front of you. Now, some of you, you're getting ready for your senior year of school, and that means for the last 12 years, I mean, you've been working hard, you've had your nose to the grindstone, and as long as you don't mess up too much this year, you're headed somewhere. You're on an educational path that will lead you to a place called graduation. And you'll get up on a stage, maybe something similar to this, and somebody will hand you a rolled up piece of paper called a diploma, and you won't look at them and be like, hey, what's this? Why are you giving me this? Because we know it was 13 years of hard work that led you to that place. Same's true with career paths, right? You started at a job, and they say, well, if you stay here for so many years, you'll move up to this position, stay so many more years, you'll be in management. Some of you, you've got your career paths figured out. You know exactly where you're going. You know what you're going to do. You know where you'll be, and you know how much you'll make doing it, because we understand that life is connected. But here's the thing. Have you ever ended up somewhere where you didn't want to be? Have you ever ended up at a place where, in school, right? You're facing your senior year. Some of the hardest conversations I had with students surrounded, I didn't have my nose to the grindstone, and I didn't get the grades that I had hoped I would get to get into the college where I was hoping to get into, or maybe even graduate the way that I hoped to graduate. I crammed 13 years into 15, right? Because I maybe made some choices that led me down a different path. The same's true in our financial world. Right? Sometimes we end up to the place where we didn't want to be in our financial world, where we've got, unimaginable debt, and we're not exactly sure how to move forward with that. We end up that way in relationships at times, where our marriage or our hoped for marriage or, our future marriage, whatever it is, isn't exactly what we wanted. There are just times in life. There are times in life where we end up in a place we never, ever expected to be. And it's true for all of us. It's true for all of us, whether it's your relationship, whether it's caring for your grandkids. You never thought you'd be at a place where you were daily caring for your grandkids, or you're facing an addiction, and you never thought, you would be one to have to face something like that. And you wish you could forget years of your life or a season of your life because you made decisions that were regrettable. The truth is, sometimes we end up in places where we never thought we'd be. And we wonder to ourselves, how did I get here, right? You've wondered that. I've wondered that. We've all had a moment in time where we've wondered and asked ourselves, how did I get to this place? How did I get to a place where I'm out of options, or at least I'm out of good options, or I'm out of options that I really want? How did I get to the place of lost? And do you know the answer to that question, how did I get here? It's not that you didn't want it. It's not that you didn't pray hard enough for it. It's not that you didn't go to church enough. It's not that, you didn't wish enough or tell enough other people that that's where you were headed. It's not that God was unfair to you. It's just that you chose your way there. Because we all choose our own adventures. We all have decisions that we make in life that lead us to a certain place. Now, there are some exceptions to that, and, the terrible news that I woke up to today about the shootings in Dayton, shootings in Texas, it's just awful. There are moments in time where we don't choose those adventures, right? There are tragedies, there are diagnoses that we had nothing to do with, there are deaths that we had nothing to do with. So please hear me out, because in this series we are not talking about those things. We're talking about the day-to-day decisions that you and I have the opportunity to make. We get to choose our own adventures, and the adventures we choose have predictable outcomes. They do. The problem is we just forget that life is connected, right? We forget that my decision today impacts my life tomorrow. We forget that, that moment where maybe you're at the bar and you're thinking, I'm feeling pretty good, and I have an adventure to choose right now. I could stop drinking, or I could have drink 3, 4, and 5, right? Or you're watching something on your device or on television, and that little autoplay feature's on, in 5 seconds, the next episode will be transmitted to your device, and you have the opportunity in that moment. You could choose your own adventure. You could choose to turn it off, or you could choose to binge watch, your favorite episodes for the next, however many hours. You've got adventures to choose when it comes to text messages. Do you send the text message, or do you withhold, or do you send more and more and more text messages? I love this one, especially with couples, there's a moment in time, let's just be honest with each other, we're in church, we can be honest. There's a moment in time in an argument when you think of something to say, and that will be pushing somebody over a proverbial cliff, right? That it's the worst. You're going to be eating leather from your foot. And so you decide in that moment, which adventure will I choose? Will I say the thing that I just have to say because it's the right thing and it's a bit of a zinger? Or will I bite my tongue? And, maybe your tongue will be a little bit shorter, but you'll still have your life. I mean, I don't know. But, you get to choose. We get to choose our own adventures. The truth is, most of us chose the way to where we are today. We did. Most of us chose the way to where we are today. And the reason I say that most of us chose the way to where we are today is because there are situations that we don't choose. But by and large, for the most part in our lives, we chose the way to where we are today. You chose the adventure that you're living. Another way of saying it is, your adventure today is a direct result of the choices you made yesterday. Or maybe it was a year ago. Or maybe it was 10 years ago. Maybe it's when you were a teenager, right? I mean, back in those days where you were thinking to yourself, this isn't going to matter later in my life. It's not going to impact my marriage. It's not going to impact my relationships or my future job or my kids or the way that I parent or anything. But the truth is it does, and we don't realize it in the moment. But yesterday is connected to today. And it doesn't matter what you hope for or dream about or pray over or if you went to church enough. Your choices trump those things every single time. Now, that could be a little bit depressing, but today is not meant to be depressing at all. So just, we'll kind of relieve that tension a little bit because that's not where we're going today. The good news is you don't have to learn to be a fortune teller. You don't have to learn how to have a crystal ball and to read the tea leaves and to know the future, to know where your decisions are going to end up. In fact, you don't have to get to a point in your life where you wake up lost, where you wonder, how in the world did I get here? What were the choices that I made that led me to this place? You don't have to end up in that place. And that's really what this series is all about choosing your own adventure, because there are certain principles that are baked into Scripture that can help us learn how to wisely choose the adventures that we are going to live out in our lives. And the good news is, if God is for you, which I believe He is, then He hasn't left us wondering and having to wander and feeling hopeless and helpless about what He wants for us and the life that He wants us to live. In fact, when Jesus was on the earth, He said, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full, a full life. And I believe God wants you to experience a very full life, which is why He made these principles so clear for us. Now, if you're in here today and somebody dragged you here and you don't even know if you believe in God or if you believe the whole Bible thing, I just want you to know, I think you should give this a try. What we're going to talk about today, there's an opportunity at the end where you can kind of give it a try. And the reason I think you should give it a try is because if you're at a place of feeling lost in life, then clearly your present decisions or your past decisions haven't led you to the right place. So why not try something new? What do you have to lose? And the thing you'll discover is there is a God, again, who loves you so much. He has incredible plans for you and for your life. So this morning, we're going to take a look at an account that's recorded for us in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 7. If you have a Bible, you may want to open it up. We'll get to that in just a couple minutes. Proverbs was written by a man named Solomon, who was the third king of the nation of Israel. Now, Solomon was the son of King David, the most well-known king. And Solomon, he was an incredibly wise person. In fact, we'd say he was the wisest person to walk the earth next to Jesus. And the reason he was so wise is because before he became king, he prayed a prayer. He had a dream about what his future was going to look like. And he said, look, I need wisdom. God, would you give me wisdom? And God gave it to him abundantly. Now, in the story that we're going to look at, Solomon is recounting a story. We don't know if it's a real story. We don't know if it's a parable exactly. But essentially what happens is that there is an older person who's sitting up in a window looking down at the street. And we don't know if the person's a man or a woman. It doesn't really matter, quite honestly. But the person's looking down at the street, and they see a drama unfolding. And as the drama unfolds, the person in the window realizes, hey, I know exactly where this is headed. Hey, I know what the outcome of this situation is going to be. Hey, I know how this adventure is going to unfold. And it wasn't because the person was brilliant. It wasn't because the person was a soothsayer or, could read the tea leaves or had a crystal ball. It was because the person had wisdom. The person had wisdom. Now, you may wonder what wisdom is, and so I want to give you just a working definition of wisdom. It's the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Experience means you've been around the block a few times, right? I mean, you've kind of had an opportunity to live life and to experience things about life. Knowledge means that not only have you experienced life, but you've kind of taken it in and you've observed and you've kind of realized where this life is going and how things interact with one another. And because of that, it's led you to have good judgment. It's led you to a place where you make wise decisions and you say, okay, I've seen the world, I've experienced the world, I've observed, and I've taken it all in, and so now I'm going to make good, wise decisions. And so that's what a person with wisdom has. Now, the truth is, as we see this story, you're going to feel a bit of ability to relate to it, because you and I have been that person up in the window watching something unfold before our eyes. Right? I mean, you've known somebody who started dating a guy and she came to you and she said, I met the guy of my dreams. Or a guy who's dating a girl and, I found the one I'm going to marry. Or I made this purchase, or I'm taking this new job. And you look at that and you think to yourself, I know where this is headed, right? Because I know that guy and I know who he dated before and I know what happened as a result, or I know that girl and I know what kind of life she leads, or I know what happens when you just leave a job because you're angry and you haven't, really thought through everything. And there are 4 words that are going through your mind. 4 words. You know what they are? Slow motion train wreck, right? Because you know where it's going. I mean, you can see it, and it's not because you're a prophet. It's because you and I, we all have a little bit of wisdom built into us. We have experience, we have knowledge, and because of that, we have some amount of good judgment. And that's exactly what was happening in this story. So that's enough kind of introduction. So, Proverbs chapter 7, beginning in verse 1. At the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice, and I saw among the simple. Now, the word simple just means gullible or naive or perhaps irresponsible. I noticed among the simple, I noticed among the young men, a youth who had no sense. Now, I just want to pause here for a second because there's some chuckles going on here. And I think, those of us who are a little bit older, we understand why there are some chuckles. And those of you who are young, you should pay attention here real quick because this is so important. You don't have experience and knowledge yet, and because of that, you can't make good judgments. And it's not because you're not good enough. It's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's just that you're young. And I know that's frustrating. And I was at a place in my life where people, say the same thing. You're young. You'll understand when you get older. And guess what? They were right. Because young people do some really dumb things that are unwise. In fact, for those of you who are like 25 and older, right? This is an all skate. If you've ever made a dumb decision, raise your hand. To young people, take a look around. Yeah, even some of you young people are raising your hands. You're smart, right? Okay, you're learning something. Good. There's some bit of wisdom here. Because it's over time that we get that experience, knowledge, and therefore can make good judgments. But the truth is, you don't have that yet. Now, being older does not guarantee knowledge and good judgment. And I won't ask you to raise your hand, those of you who have made bad decisions as an older person, but just know, it's not a value thing. It's not a one person is better than another person thing. It's just a wisdom thing. And so Solomon, as he's telling the story, sees this young kind of simple kid walking down the street, and he realizes this drama's going to unfold, and so here it goes. He was going down the street near her corner, because there was a she involved, right? He's walking along in the direction of her house at twilight, as the day was fading, as the dark of night set in. Now, there are some things that we don't really get as a 21st century audience, but for Solomon's audience, 3,000 years ago, the whole twilight concept, that was bedtime. They didn't have electricity, right? So, twilight was the time when things got a little rough on the streets. You wanted to stay indoors. But this young man, he didn't have a whole lot of knowledge and experience, and so therefore didn't have good judgment. He was a little simple, and so he's walking out on the street, and he kind of chose this. Now, it doesn't require a seminary degree to figure out where this story is going, right? You don't even have to be a Christian, right? A common person, anybody could figure it out where this is taking place or what's going to happen here, because the young man, he's walking around down the street, and he's kind of strutting his stuff, and there's a soundtrack that's playing in his mind. You know what that soundtrack is? Go ahead, play the soundtrack. Here we go. He's all that in a bag of chips, right? He has just figured out. he's high on life. I mean, he's thinking, I'm cool, I am awesome. Maybe he's been flexing in the mirror with his shirt off, admiring things like, how can the ladies resist this? I mean, he is just awesome. He is feeling high on life. And he goes past her house and he's thinking, I've heard stories about her. I've wondered, I've kind of dreamed about this. I mean, maybe, could it be? I wonder what happened. It's kind of night out. Let's take a look and see. And so he goes wandering past her house. And from up in the window, remember, there's another person up there watching all of this unfold. And the person in the window hears a soundtrack too, but it's not the soundtrack of like the Bee Gees, or it's not the soundtrack of a rock star. You know what it's the soundtrack of? It's a horror film, right? I mean, he knows what's going to happen. It's slow motion train wreck. He knows what's going to happen. And the thing I want you to know is that there is a big difference. There is a big difference between what this young man is feeling and thinking and hoping and intending and dreaming about and reality. And the person up in the window is looking at this through the lens of wisdom, from experience and knowledge and good judgment, and he sees or she sees where this is going and what's going to happen. But the young person, he's looking at this through the lens of passion, right? Because if something is so wrong, then I don't want to be right. I mean, this is what I'm made for. These are my dreams. This is my hope. But the truth is, the end is predictable. The end is very, very predictable. So the drama began. Verse 10, then out came a woman to meet him. There she is, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. So now you know where it's headed. If you didn't know, here you know. She's dressed to kill. Now, just so you know, Solomon isn't saying all women are dressed to kill or that all women are like this. He's just this particular one. And so he goes on. He says, she's unruly and defiant. Her feet never stay at home. Now in the street, now in the squares, at every corner she lurks. Because a wise person has restraint, but this woman doesn't have restraint. She's lurking around. She has crafty intentions. She is like an animal that is out on the hunt. She took hold of him and kissed him. And with a brazen face or a bold face, she said, now this is getting kind of exciting, isn't it? I mean, the drama, you can just feel the tension. Now, unfortunately, it's church, so I can't read what she said because that would be inappropriate. I'm just kidding about that. But if you're the young man in this moment, if you're the young man, what are you thinking? I mean, you weren't sure what you wanted exactly, but here she comes, and she's not, you were hoping maybe you'd just get to see her, maybe exchange text, or phone numbers so you could text. But she grabs him by the face and smacks one on him. He's thinking, oh my goodness, this is not what I thought it was going to be, but because he gets to choose his own adventure. He gets to make this decision in these moments, what he's going to do and how he's going to move forward. And he sees this as the moment of his dreams. Again, the wise person realizes that something else is at play. So here were her words. So exciting. She says, today I fulfilled my vows and I have food. I have food from my fellowship offering at home. Guys, isn't that what we long to hear, right? And she's the forbidden woman, so she probably has bacon, which wasn't kosher in this day and age. We don't know for sure, but so here's what she's saying. She's essentially saying, look, I've taken my sin bucket and I have dumped it on the altar. I've gotten everything right with God. And now I just want you to know I'm ready to fill my sin bucket up again. And guess what I want to fill it up with? You, right? Because you are the object of my dreams. She goes on, so I came out to meet you. I looked for you. And I have found you. This is special. This is your night. It says, I've covered my bed with colored linens from Egypt. Let me be clear here. If I wasn't clear before, this is where it's headed. I've perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. This is a night of bliss. This is all for you. This is all for you. This is your time. This is your night. And then she goes on and says, don't worry, because I know what you're thinking. She says, my husband is not at home. He's gone on a long journey. He took his purse filled with money and will not be home till full moon. And the guy, I mean, he's probably thinking, pinch me, is this real? I mean, is this actually happening? I just wanted to see her. I just hoped that I would see her. And now she kisses me and invites me in, and we're going to spend a night of bliss together. And it's going to be sensual, and it's going to be awesome. That's certainly one perspective. And that's certainly one adventure. But the person with wisdom sees a different perspective. And he realizes that this adventure is not headed exactly where this young man thinks it's going. So he goes on, and Solomon says, with persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with smooth talk. And all at once, in other words, without much thought, he followed her. And bam! It was like an ox going to the slaughter. Like a deer stepping into a noose till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. Because in those moments, his momentary one-time, one-night decision had far greater implications. Because life is connected. And he didn't realize it. He didn't know it. Like an animal that gets caught in a trap, not knowing what the future would hold, the future was very clear. It would cost him something, and for this young man, it would cost him something very dear. It would cost him his life. And so then, the narrator, Solomon, he comes with this fascinating conclusion. Here's what he says. He says, "Now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say." Here's an opportunity to gain some wisdom. Don't miss this. He says, do not let your heart, which in the Hebrew mindset was the core of your being, who you are. Because once your heart gets dragged into something, your whole being is dragged into it. He says, do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her paths. And I can just imagine the young man at this point in time as he's listening to the wiser, older person saying to him, paths? What are you talking about, paths? It was a night. It was a kiss. It was a date. It was a click. It was a movie. It was a drink. It was a spring break. It was a credit card, whatever it is. And we're tempted to think it's all about sexual stuff, but it's not. I mean, the point is that temptation comes at you like a wily woman dressed like a prostitute, kisses you on the face and says, come on, come to bed with me. But it's not all that it seems. It feels like a special thing. It feels like it's just this moment. It feels like, everybody else on a path, but I'm different. I'm unique. I'm special. This is my time. This is my moment. And the wiser, older person says, you're not special. You're unique just like everybody else. There is nothing different about this. You are on a path. He says, many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. You're not unique in this moment. You're on a highway. You are on a flipping highway that is littered with bodies by a bunch of other people who went down this path before you and said, I'm unique. It won't happen to me. I'm unique. The consequences won't follow the actions. I'm unique, and I'll be able to break the odds. And it never, ever, ever works that way. And you get where the path takes you, and you say, how did I end up here? And the answer to that is you chose your own adventure. You chose your way to that path. And it doesn't matter what you want. It doesn't matter what you hope for, what you dream about, if you read the Bible enough, if you prayed enough about it. The fact is, the adventures we choose have very predictable outcomes. So in light of that, in light of the story, there are two questions I want to ask you as we close today. The first question is, are you lost? Are you lost? Because you're choosing your own adventure and you've maybe ended up in a place where you didn't want to be, you never expected to be. Or maybe you know where you are, but you're not quite sure how you got there, and frankly, you're not sure it's where you want to be. Winnie the Pooh said it like this, said, I'm not lost, for I know where I am. But, however, where I am may be lost. And maybe you can relate to that, and you're asking the question, how did I get here? How did I get here? I'm in my 30s and I'm living with my parents. How did I get here? I want to be able to retire at 65 or 67, but financially, it's just not going to happen. How did I get here? I want to be close to God, but I don't feel close to God, and how in the world did I get here? I want to be married, but I don't know what my prospects are like. How did I get here? I want to have a different job, and yet this is the job I've been living for years, and I don't know. How did I get here? I want to be able to be financially stable, but I'm not. How did I get here? See, the young man was absolutely convinced that he could break the odds. That's what he was convinced of. I can break the odds. But the problem is life is too connected. It is too connected. And we understand that. We understand that with certain areas of our lives. Driving on I-74, east or west, we know where it's going to take us. We understand that eating a steady diet of Oreos and cake and refusing to work out will never lead you to the destination of losing weight, right? We get that. But sometimes we forget that if we spread our family too thin because we run from activity to activity to activity and we keep everybody busy, you'll never get to the place of having close family relationships, because relationships happen in the margins of life, and it's true for people inside our families and outside of our families. And if there is no margin, there can be no closeness. We, fail to remember that if you choose to live without a budget and spend money recklessly and go on vacations you can't afford, you'll never end up at a place of financial peace. If you harbor unforgiveness and bitterness in your life, you will never end up at a place of joy. If you want your kids to have a vibrant faith relationship with God, skipping church and being focused on sports and other activities will never get them there. It just won't happen because the path isn't taking you in the direction you're hoping to go. Your adventure will never, ever take you there. And the truth is, we find a place where we're lost and we say, how did I get here? Because you were on the wrong path. And your good intentions and your prayers don't matter. They don't, because you bumped up against a principle. And the principle is an important one. Is that the adventures we choose have predictable outcomes. And the best way to predict where you'll end up is to look down the road you're headed on right now. And you can think you're unique and you can break that principle, but the fact is it's a principle, and you don't break principles, you break yourself against the principles. And you'll find yourself at a place you never wanted to be. So are you lost? Are you lost? Are you refusing to admit it? There may be an important place to sit with that in the coming days. So the second question is, will your current choices take you where you want to go? The decisions that you're making, if life is connected and the decisions you're making are going to lead you in the direction you're headed, are they going where you want to go? And I can't answer that question for you. In fact, that's something you're going to have to spend some time, reflecting on and thinking about. But are the decisions you're making leading you to the place where you ultimately want to end up? Are your relationships going in the direction you want your relationships to go in? Is your financial world going in the direction you want your financial world to go in? Your educational world, as you get ready for this school year to start, or some of you maybe started already, are you working in the direction that you need to go in order to graduate or complete a successful year of school? Only you can answer that question. And it takes time to think about our relationships, our values, the things that are important to us, our family, our work life. It takes time to think about those, and the most important thing that you could do is to spend some time thinking about them. So are you headed in the right direction? And you may not know how to answer that question. You may be wondering, I don't know what different decision to make. In fact, that might be one of the hardest things you ever do. It takes courage to recognize I'm not going the way I need to be going in life. And it takes courage to make a course correction now in these moments. Now before the marriage, ends in divorce. Now before I have to file for bankruptcy. Now before I'm out of good opportunities, I'm out of good options. Now, I could still graduate at the end of this year if I worked really hard. And again, you may not know how to choose differently, but that's what this series is all about. It's all about saying, how do we choose an adventure that's worthwhile choosing? And the lesson today, the principle today, is that today is connected to tomorrow. That wise people understand the importance of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. And they course correct when they need to make course corrections. Years ago, when I was in 4th or 5th grade, we had a snowfall, and this was back in the days before e-learning where you could actually go out and enjoy the snowfall, you know what I'm talking about? And sled and, play around. And we had this big woods behind our house, and there was this creek, and my brothers and I, we loved playing out at the creek and whatnot, and there was this area that was, 3 to 4, maybe up to 5 feet deep in water, and it was iced over because it had been cold, but the temperature outside was going up, and the ice was starting to melt, and I thought it would be really fun to go out on the ice. And so I did. And my brothers looked at me, I was the youngest, and they looked at me and said, "Don't go out on the ice, it's too warm, it's going to break." And I looked at them because I was simple, and I said to them, "No, it's not." And so I walked out on the ice, and I didn't just stand there and look at them. I did a very foolish thing. I started jumping up and down. And in a matter of minutes, or seconds really, I was waist deep in freezing cold water, and it was absolutely miserable, and the reason I was there was because I didn't listen to wisdom. And if I had been wise, I would have listened to the voices of reason coming from around me, and I would have realized how foolish my decision was. And I'm telling you, as your pastor and friend, the last thing I want for you is to end up at a place where you're waist deep in icy cold water, freezing your little patootie off, and wondering, how did I get here? How did I get here? Because the answer is always, you chose your way. You chose that adventure for yourself. But here's the good news. You can choose wisdom. In fact, Solomon said this in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 26. It's so important. He said, ponder, which means think about. Spend some careful time considering. Ponder the path of your feet. And then all your ways will be sure. But you've got to spend some time thinking about it and considering it and processing it and realizing that today is connected to tomorrow, which is connected to the next day. And a wise person lives life according to that principle. So that's the first part of learning how to choose your own adventure. I hope you will be back next week as we continue looking at wise ways to live out the adventure we've been given. Let me pray for us. God, I just thank you so much that this has been preserved for us for so many years. Lord, the truth is many of us have found ourselves at a place of lost. There are probably people in the room this morning who feel lost. We've all been at that place before. And the way we got there was because of choices that we made. And so, Lord, I pray for the person who's just struggling right now. I pray that you would help them to assess where they are. I pray for all of us that we would take a look at where we are and if this adventure is the one we really want to be living, or if there are different choices we should be making that would lead us to a better place. Lord, I pray for every person in the room. I pray that we would have wisdom, that we would gain wisdom, that we would ask you for wisdom, that we would see that life is connected, that today is connected to tomorrow. And God, I pray that you would give each one of us the courage to make course corrections when we need to. So, Father, thank you for this time. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.